Hello you lovely lot and welcome to a new video. My name is Katie and we're going to take a look at a very interesting medium indeed. This is the Shinhan Pass Colour Design Water and Gouache Hybrid. In essence, it is the best of both worlds. Now, if you're new here, I'd better let you know I have a bit of a gouache series on at the moment where I'm going through lots of different brands and different price ranges, but I was actually sent this one by one of my lovely subscribers about 12 months ago. My lovely friend Emma was having a clear out and just sent them across to me. She sent me a couple of other bits as well, so thank you so much. And I noticed these in there and yeah, they are very interesting. And I'm going to run through the selection of colours that she sent me. So I was sent a pink, a brilliant pink, a bright red, Alzerian crimson, cobalt blue, blue celeste, peacock blue, compose blue, permanent yellow, orange, Juan brilliant, linden green and lilac. And they are quite a delicious selection of colours, with my favourite being that bright red and that blue celeste and maybe the really bright pink that's going on there. But I'm ever so slightly digressing here. So yes, it's a watercolour gouache hybrid, and I guess it's pretty self-explanatory, you can use it as both. Now for this video I'm going to treat it more like a watercolour. And the main reason being is I want to order a couple of colours off Jackson's just to complete the palette before using it as a gouache. Using it as a watercolour, I feel I can perhaps maybe include one or two existing watercolours that I have at the moment for those dark tones like a black or a Payne's grey that might be missing there. I've used a mass tone straight onto the page and then diluted it with water, and obviously if you've watched the gouache series I tend to just use it neat on the page, so again this is going to be a medium I'm going to have to revisit in the near future. But I thought it had been a while since I'd done any watercolours and I thought this would be a great opportunity to do so. So the paper I'm using is the Grabby watercolour paper. It's a cold press, it's 100% cotton and it's 300 GSM. Oh, and it's A5 size. And I wanted to use something a little textured, I guess, just to see how these would behave on the paper. And I wanted to see if they were a good representation of watercolours, because again, if you're a regular here, and if you're new I'm going to tell you anyway, I'm not a big fan of using gouache like a watercolour. I know it's possible, I'm not criticising anyone who does, in fact hats off to you. For me, I just can't seem to make it work. I'm never very happy with the finish, and again this is probably down to me using it and not how that medium is used, but I don't like how it lays down. I'm not a huge fan of how the colours can interact, and I kind of think if I wanted to do a watercolour type technique then well, I'd just use a watercolour. And in the same respect, I probably wouldn't use a watercolour like a gouache. I wouldn't apply really thickly all over like I tend to do. I find when you do that with watercolours, you get this slightly shiny surface, especially if you're really going in there concentrated. And also, I kind of think it's just a little bit of a waste using your watercolours like that. That's just me personally though. I mean, you do you. But for this video I thought I would just dive straight in there and treat it like a watercolour, because half of it kind of is. Now you will have observed that I colour blocked all of the areas in using a variety of techniques, mainly a wet and wet one. I wanted to see how those colours danced upon a pre-wettened surface there. And yes, it was very much like a watercolour. I felt that the particles in there were actually quite nice and fine, and they definitely moved within the liquid there. I also like the fact as well that even though these are quite pastel colours, and obviously there's going to be a little bit of white pigment in there I'm sure, there was still a really nice level of transparency there, which surprised me. And again, referring back to using a gouache like a watercolour, that's probably why I'm not a big fan. You don't quite have that transparency there. I also noticed as well how incredibly vibrant these colours remained, and yes, we have got quite a diluted version on the page, but to be honest, if you compare it to what's in the palette right now, it's not actually that far of a stretch from it, and yeah, I was really impressed with that. For doing the more finer areas, obviously there's a higher concentration in there because I do want those parts to stand out predominantly more than what's beneath it. But again, the painting experience still felt more like an authentic watercolour experience, which again surprised me. I was half expecting it to perhaps just feel a little bit thicker, you know, like when using a gouache, but no, I'd obviously gone beyond that gouache sweet spot for painting with, and perhaps just dipped my toe in that watercolour. I needed a little bit more concentrated colour sweet spot, if you know what I mean there. Kind of in danger of waffling a little bit. But I was really impressed with how it actually performed as a watercolour. Now, I know your fluorescent-y colours and your pinks and certain blues aren't going to have an amazing light fast rating, but I mean, I'm okay with that. This is a nice painting exercise. And if you really want to nitpick, I mean, gouache, the gouache side of this paint, gouache isn't massively designed for that, so again, I'm okay with that too. It would probably be used on a picture I'd want to reproduce or something like that. But the reason I brought that up is I absolutely love that fluorescent pink. I'm not a pink person, but that colour, I don't know, it was a little bit of me. And that bright red, even though I don't particularly use it on this picture, but I keep looking at how beautiful and vibrant that is. Even in its diluted form, it is so beautiful, vibrant, rich, just like all the other swatches. So I think you wouldn't need to use perhaps as much as I've used in the palette there to create a painting with. I'd say movement on the paper wise, it's not going to dance across the page like the Quar paints, which I really want to revisit actually. I love how fast the Quar pigments travel on a wet and wet technique. These aren't quite to that level, but they moved beautifully. They were so nice to control. I kind of wish I'd actually used a little bit of salt on this picture as well, just to add a bit of texture, but to be honest, I was quite charmed by the vibrancy of colours there and the amount of control I'd got over everything. If I had to also compare these with another watercolour brand, I'd say they were up there with Holbein watercolours. Mainly for that vibrancy, but I find Holbein the complete opposite of Quar, and Holbein really does tend to stay in one place when you're painting with it, but that's just my experience and just my opinion there. For the background of this piece, I did introduce a little bit of the Turner neutral tint, and again, this is what my lovely subscriber friend sent to me, so thank you again for that. And this was perfect to just add in some depth of colour there without taking it over like perhaps using a black would. I love the fact though that it didn't alter the performance, and again that transparency still remained. There was obviously some pigment in there from the Shinhan Pass paints, but it was also really good that the neutral tint didn't interfere with the formula too much. I guess that's what I'm trying to say here. For more concentrated colours, again a bit of the neutral tint and using the Shinhan Pass on a little more concentrated but not quite gouache level dilution there, and yeah, I thought that was perfect for adding some outlines and some further details into this character's hair. So yes, overall, as you can see, I'm very, very impressed and surprised by these paints, at least from a watercolour stance. Although I did feel like this just needed a little bit of something to catch the eye, so getting out my Van Gogh metallic set, and I couldn't tell you which one I used because them pans are welded into the packaging and they haven't been pulled out for years, and to be honest, it was in the days before I swatched anything, so I could not tell you for the life of me which silver I used there, but it did need to be silver. because the watercolours themselves actually did dry quite matte, very much like a gouache paint and not unlike using a very high concentration of watercolour paint, I felt like I just needed something there to catch the light a little bit, just add a little bit of movement there. So with the addition of that silvery paint, it was like the cherry on the cake for this. And another good point as well, I suppose, about it being a hybrid paint is it went over the silver really well without too much of that shiny reflectiveness coming through. Because if I'm honest and I'm using metallics alongside regular watercolours and I go a little bit too far with the metallics, I find it so difficult to, I guess, amend that and go over it with your regular watercolours. You've still got that shininess coming through. Not the case with this. So I suppose in conclusion, yes, I really like these. I wish I'd used them sooner actually, and if you're curious, at least from a watercolour stance, then I would definitely give these a try. They're quite versatile, they're beautifully pigmented. Again, if light fast issues aren't a thing, don't worry about it. It does have all the pigment information on the backs of the tubes, and wherever you decide to buy them from, it should have that on the website, so you are free to make your own decisions there. But as a painting experience, yeah, it's an absolute joy, and depending on how well it performs as a gouache, it could be quite a versatile supply to have in your collection. Especially if you want to create a mixed media piece and still have the same pigments used. Imagine like having a good watercolour picture and then adding some details and some stronger details in a foreground perhaps with the gouache. That could be a beautiful marriage, all in one tube. But of course, this is just my opinion, and if you have tried this paint yourselves, let me know down below what you think. And as well, do you think a supply like this could be useful to you? I'd say the only downside, and again I haven't tried this so who knows, but you can't squeeze it into pans like you could with a watercolour. However, I'm pretty sure if you just dipped your paintbrush into the tube, put a little bit on your mixing surface, I don't think you're really going to waste that much because it's so incredible and so incredibly vibrant. Just probably not great to travel with, but hey ho, I might revisit that at some point and let you guys know how it turns out. Speaking of turning out, I think this one turned out great. I love it. I love this paint and I love what I created with it. So if you've been curious about this hybrid watercolour, then I hope that this video has satisfied that curiosity. I'll leave a couple more interesting things to click on screen if you want to watch some more. And I just want to say thank you again, Emma, for sending me these. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you lovely lots soon. Bye!